You mentioned the numbers today coming from the Labor Department, doubling those that came out last week. That means over the past couple of weeks, you've had nearly 10 million people claiming unemployment. And that poses a variety of questions. First, how they are going to get relief. The president last week signed that relief bill, but there are questions about when people are actually going to receive those checks. They might not see them for several weeks, if not months. So that is a big question that we will be waiting to see how the White House responds to that. Ed and I were just on a call with the Biden campaign, and Joe Biden was very critical of the Treasury Department not being able to get those checks to people as quickly as possible, and he had been calling for ways to do that. That also raises questions about health insurance. Remember, yesterday we were talking about the Trump administration saying that they were not going to open up Obamacare exchanges, Affordable Health Act exchanges for people who are now unemployed and don't qualify for Medicaid or Medicare in some ways, how they're actually going to get coverage. So these are components. I'm sorry, I'm hearing something from the control room at this moment, but those are some questions that we are waiting to see how the administration will respond today.
Okay, yeah, we're still sorting through the technical issues as we all continue to work from home and try to remain safe here. Ed, let me turn to you because it was really interesting to see former Vice President Joe Biden just in the last hour address people's questions about this. He made a statement, and if people missed it, took a couple of questions. But on this issue of unemployment and those people who now no longer have insurance, tell us a little bit about some of the back and forth that we have been seeing on this topic, because the president was actually asked about this yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, Biden certainly will continue to make an issue of it. It's in his interest, both because, the kind of people who have been laid off are more likely to, or many of them are going to be Democratic voters. And so he's going to be somewhat sensitive to making sure that they can get back up on their feet as fast as they can, and that the checks, frankly, get to them. Part of the problem we learned this week from the Labor Department is that there might actually be some transmission issues between the federal government and transmitting so much money at one time to the various states, because a lot of these states use outdated computer equipment. And so there may be some issues with directly depositing the funds that the states then need to distribute to people. And that is part of the reason why there could be a slowdown in getting the money to both sides. But look, I think this is the kind of issue on which the campaign now, the presumed campaign between the president and Joe Biden, will be fought. Biden can sit there in Wilmington, Delaware, and essentially raise concerns about various aspects of the management of this, not only to specifically raise concerns about something that's happened, but also to make the broader argument that he would better manage the response and the country's recovery from all of this. And we'll see whether it ultimately pays off. We noticed in our polling that was released this morning a 2-point slip week to week in overall support for the president's response to this crisis, now hovering just above 50%. That signals that the longer this goes on, potentially, the more questions will be raised about the president's response and how the administration is doing with all of this. And given that this is now expected to last several more weeks or months, there is a real danger for the administration if things don't go well, not only on the recovery front, the recovery of those infected, but the recovery of the economy and the country overall.
And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced this bipartisan select committee on the coronavirus crisis. What is it that the committee is going to be focusing on?
Well, she says it's bipartisan. I think it's interesting that she announced this without any Republican buy-in that we're aware of just yet. But basically, as she sees it, it's a committee that will have the jurisdiction to look into everything regarding how the administration prepared for the coronavirus outbreak, how it implemented the various actions it took, and whether or not the money that's being distributed by these trillion-dollar relief bills that Congress has passed is going out correctly and promptly. It will be led, she says, by Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, the number 3 House Democrat. When I read that, I wondered. I said, we know that he is a close friend and strong supporter of Joe Biden. This committee very likely won't be able to meet in person until late summer or the fall. Do Republicans really expect, or will they tolerate, a close Biden ally running this panel when Biden will be out there making similar criticisms of the president and his response potentially later this year? It'd be interesting to see. She says it will be bipartisan. We don't know how many members. We don't know who Republicans, if any, they would put on this. And we certainly don't know whether the administration would play ball. They have issued guidance just in the last 48 hours or so to federal agencies, to cabinet officials, that essentially they shouldn't feel compelled to respond to any request from Congress for information until at least the end of this month. That's sure to infuriate Democrats and some Republicans who expect the administration to be responding to congressional inquiries, but it's a sign of how focused the administration, or at least they'll say it's a sign of how intensely focused they are on the now and not necessarily on responding to requests for information from lawmakers.
Caitlin, if we have you back here, I want to go back to this notion of the relief package and the help that is being made available to Americans. Our latest CBS News poll found bipartisan support for the $2 trillion economic relief package, but it also found 57% of people feel it's not enough money. So, Caitlin, what does that mean for lawmakers?
That's right, and that's why you hear this interest in having an additional relief program, especially when you see those numbers coming from the Labor Department today, about 6.6 million more people over the last week filing unemployment claims. That means that they are going to need more help, and there are questions about whether that $2 trillion package is enough for all of those people who have now been laid off, who are trying to claim uninsurance, or trying to claim unemployment at such a high rate that it is actually crashing government websites. So there is this question about how people can actually apply to get this kind of relief, either in the traditional form or through small business loans that are available through that new relief package. If this is a complicated process, if government sites are crashing because of the sheer magnitude of this issue. So there are going to be questions asked, especially at this briefing, about what further relief looks like, especially if checks that are supposed to be on their way are going to take several weeks, if not months, and especially as more and more people start having to claim unemployment.
On the issue of PPE, the personal protective equipment that governors have said that they so desperately need in their states. On Twitter this morning, the president appeared to criticize governors who've been vocal about the lack of PPE that they've received from the federal government. The president said, quote, "Complainers should have been stocked up and ready long before the crisis hit." Caitlin, I know there was that video conference call earlier in the week with governors. How is that message likely to go over with them?
Probably not well. You've had governors from both parties say that they need more equipment in their states, that they are not as well equipped as they'd like to be. You've heard a lot about ventilators, governors like Andrew Cuomo asking for more ventilators and to have a stockpile in order to be able to be prepared for the wave that is coming. You've also heard them say, like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, for example, that they are not getting the equipment that they need for those medical workers on the front lines. We have seen the president be very critical of governors who have been critical of him. He said that he doesn't like to call those governors who are critical of him. Instead, he has Vice President Pence, who is ahead of the task force on coronavirus, reach out to them and talk to them. And so you've seen these rivalries go on that are really problematic in a pandemic, to say the least. And so that kind of response isn't likely to sit well with governors, but we actually heard from Joe Biden just minutes ago on this call that Ed and I were on, Joe Biden calling for the president to use the Defense Production Act as a way to not only compel companies to make ventilators, which he has done, but also to compel them to make protective equipment, masks, other pieces of equipment for those medical workers on the front lines.
Finally, Ed, we know that the Democratic National Committee today announced that this year's nominating convention will now be held the week of August 17th. And Ed, I know that you reported on possible changes to the convention. What more can you tell us?
Well, it turns out that when we were talking to party leaders all across the country the last few days, those that actually are organizing the convention were already making plans to delay it into August. Remember, it was originally scheduled to be held in mid-July, before the Olympics and well before the Republican convention. Tradition is that the challengers party goes first and the incumbent party goes second. Now that the Olympics have been canceled and there's a gap right before that Republican convention, which is held the last full week of August, Democrats have opted to move it to August 17th in Milwaukee. We'll see in what form and in what fashion exactly it's held. There was a call this afternoon with DNC members of the Democratic National Committee, where convention organizers made clear that it may not be exactly like it's been before. That could mean fewer days. That could mean a change in who exactly is allowed into the venue at one time or another, but that they will move forward with some kind of a convention to formally nominate the party's candidate, and that they will be rolling out some of the things that they were hoping to implement in mid-July earlier, things like reaching out to voters across digital platforms and realizing that really they can't afford to wait to, in some ways, start the general election until August. But this gives Democrats more time, obviously, to sort out when they can hold their primaries, how delegates will be allocated, who the running mate will be, and who ultimately actually wins. One thing we've also seen just today, a federal judge was asked in Wisconsin to possibly move Wisconsin's primary, which is scheduled for next Tuesday. That federal judge declined to do so, saying it's a state matter, but criticized state leaders for continuing to hold it next Tuesday. Republican legislators refused the Democratic governor's requests to move it. They may make some changes in absentee ballot rules to allow more people to vote. And Puerto Rico today said that a primary scheduled for late April is also likely going to get delayed now because the Democratic convention is being held later in the summer. All of this, Elaine, just another example of how coronavirus is completely upending American society in all sorts of ways. It means that many parts of the campaign that we expected to happen sooner rather than later will get pushed off. And just because they've scheduled it for mid-August and expect to meet in Milwaukee doesn't necessarily guarantee, of course, that they will. Because as Joe Biden said on that call that Caitlin and I were on, they're taking cues from scientists and from doctors. If for some reason scientists and doctors are saying by midsummer it's still not a good idea to meet in August, the Democrats are going to have to come up with a different plan.
Right. Dr. Anthony Fauci has said time and time again, the virus makes the timeline. All right. Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns, again, so very good to see you both. Stay safe, and we will talk to you again soon. Again, we are waiting for the president and the White House coronavirus task force to hold their briefing. Just as soon as it happens, we'll bring that to you. It was scheduled to take place at 5 o'clock. These things do slide, but we're going to take a quick break for now. More news straight ahead. Stay with us. You're streaming CBSN, CBS News, always on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninan coming to you from my home office. Out of an abundance of caution, we've moved here instead of the broadcast center, and I want to bring you the latest news as we have it. We began with the growing number of coronavirus cases across the country, the sobering number of people who continue to die from it as well. There are now over 217,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with more than 5,100 deaths. New York continues to be the state at the nation's epicenter with more than 83,000 cases. Naomi Ruckham reports from New York City, where many hospital workers are dealing with a surge of patients.
This video captured workers loading a body bag into a refrigerated truck outside a Brooklyn medical center. In the span of 72 hours, the number of coronavirus deaths in New York State more than doubled, and paramedics in the city received new marching orders. If a patient is in cardiac arrest and EMTs are not able to get a pulse back at the scene, the patient will not be transported to a hospital. Most are overwhelmed.
Turnover, someone passes away, all right, get the room clean, next person in immediately. I mean, there's patients sitting in the ER on ventilators waiting to come up.
We are standing at a comfortable distance from a coronavirus field hospital situated in New York Central Park. We're told there are only 6 patients here right now, but there are 68 beds and a staff that came in from out of state to help. Field hospitals are popping up all over the country, from this one in New Haven, Connecticut, to another in this downtown Detroit Convention Center and another in San Mateo, California. Today, New Jersey's governor toured a new one located inside the Meadowlands Exposition Center.
And this is a marathon. We're going to be in this for a while.
In Los Angeles, the mayor has urged his residents, sick or not, to wear face masks. Dr. David Agus explains the point of wearing masks.
20% of people, or maybe more, never have symptoms with this virus, and obviously they can be contagious. You know, when you put a mask on, it's not actually to protect you from somebody else. It's so the droplets in your mouth don't get out.
Nurses in several states are protesting over a lack of protective gear. Many say their hospitals are rationing critical supplies. Naomi Ruckham, CBS News, New York.
The federal government is running dangerously low on vital equipment that hospitals need to fight the pandemic. This comes as President Trump is now weighing new domestic travel bans for some areas hit hard by the pandemic. Natalie Brand reports.
The FDA is announcing it has approved the first test that can detect whether people have already developed antibodies to COVID-19.
The peace of mind that would come from knowing you already were infected, you have antibody, you're safe from reinfection 99.9% of the time.
The coronavirus response coordinator, Dr. Deborah Burke, says the task force is working with universities across the country to develop these types of tests.
I think that would be very reassuring to the healthcare workers who have been on the front line. We worry about them every day.
To stop the spread of the virus, President Trump says he's considering a limited travel ban for areas hardest hit by the pandemic, but a decision has not been made.
I am looking where flights are going into hotspots, but closing up every single flight on every single airline, that's a very, very, very rough decision.
The president also confirmed the national stockpile of medical equipment for emergencies is almost completely drained.
The National Guard is moving a lot of this equipment and medical supplies into a hospital or into an area where it's needed by the state.
State leaders say they're still competing against each other for supplies, prompting New York Senator Chuck Schumer to call on the president to streamline the process under the Defense Production Act.
We need him to put in charge a czar of the whole production and distribution of these materials under the DPA.
President Trump, responding to Senator Schumer, tweeted, "Remember, we are a backup for them. The complainers should have been stocked up and ready long before this crisis hit. Other states are thrilled with the job we've done." Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
The number of Americans out of work as a result of the coronavirus is soaring. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, more than 6.5 million people filed for unemployment last week. That's double the previous record of 3.3 million just set weeks ago. Well, one estimate suggests as many as 20 million Americans could be out of work by summer. Michael George spoke to a man who's one of the millions of faces behind the unemployment numbers.
Straight to the White House now and the president's coronavirus task force briefing. Let's listen in.
Countless American lives saved. We're going to save a lot of American lives, and we're in control of our own fate, very much so. Maintaining social distance, practicing vigorous hygiene, and staying at home are your most effective ways to win the war and to escape danger. While you're fighting this battle from home, we're working with the best scientists, doctors, and researchers anywhere in the world. We're racing to develop new ways to protect against the virus, as well as therapies, treatments, and ultimately a vaccine, and we're making a lot of progress. I think medically a lot of progress. At the same time, we're also racing to get relief to American workers and small businesses, as you know. I want to remind small business owners across America that the Paycheck Protection Program is launching tomorrow. Nearly $350 billion in loans will be available to small businesses, including sole proprietors. These loans are up to 100% forgivable as long as employers keep paying their workers. Got to take care of your workers. Furthermore, we want Social Security beneficiaries to know that if they are typically not required to file a tax return, they don't have to file one in order to receive the direct cash payments that will soon be distributed to American citizens. The Treasury will deposit the money directly into the bank accounts. And don't forget, I will always protect your Social Security, your Medicare, and your Medicaid. We're protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and I always will. I'd like now to invite SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza, who's doing a fantastic job. She's going to be very busy in the next little while. And Secretary Steve Mnuchin to say a few words about these vital initiatives, and then we'll get on to the attack of the virus itself. And please, if I might, Steve and Jovita.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Vice President, Secretary Mnuchin, Ivanka Trump, and all who I have been working closely with in this effort. Small business is the backbone of the American economy, and the President has put the nation's 30 million small businesses front and center in the response effort, and we are working hard to get money to them quickly. This is an unprecedented effort by this administration to support small businesses, and we know that there will be challenges in the process. Secretary Mnuchin and I are working in tandem to ensure that feedback from our partners is being heard and implemented. The private and public sector must work closely together to ensure that small businesses and their workers across the country are put first. This administration believes wholeheartedly that if you are a small business, you are a critical part of the economic fabric of this country, and your viability is critical to the economic well-being of your employees. At SBA, we are working around the clock to support small businesses, ensuring that we are prioritizing emergency capital for small businesses that are suffering economic harm as a result of this unprecedented situation. This relief will help stabilize the small business sector by providing businesses with the financial resources they need to keep their workers employed and keep up with their day-to-day operating expenses. Today, I want to ensure that small businesses all over the country know about the Paycheck Protection Program and how they can benefit from this. Simply put, the Paycheck Protection Program is to help keep employees on payroll and small businesses open. SBA will forgive the portion of the loan that is used toward job retention and certain other expenses. We are working closely with lenders so that businesses can go directly to their local lenders. Paycheck Protection Program is in addition to substantial work that the SBA has and will continue to do to help small businesses, including providing advances on SBA disaster loans and forgiving existing SBA loan payments over the next 6 months. Additional details on these critically important programs can be found at sba.gov, and we will be updating these resources regularly. Our hearts go out to those affected by this terrible virus. Our communities around the country are stepping up, and we will get through this together. At SBA, we know that every phone call, email, or application submitted has a small business owner, their employees, and the communities they support are on the other side. Our most important objective is to allow small businesses to keep their employees on board and keep their businesses viable through this unprecedented disruption. I want to reiterate the importance of patience in this process as we work together to ensure that businesses are able to access needed credit. We will continue working around the clock as we've done with our federal and private sector partners, expanding capacity and working to make our systems as robust as possible to meet the needs. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Jovita. Mr. President, you've made clear to us we now need to execute. We need to get money to small business and American workers, and that's what we're doing. The SBA and Treasury committed to get this program up and running tomorrow. And when Jovita says people working around the clock, we had both teams working till 4 o'clock in the morning and start working again today. We've heard feedback from lenders, community banks, regional banks, and we spent the last 24 hours making this system even easier. So this will be up and running tomorrow. I encourage all small businesses that have 500 or fewer people, please contact your lenders. Any FDIC institution will be able to do this, any credit union, existing SBA lenders, and fintech lenders. You get the money, you'll get it the same day. You use this to pay your workers. Please bring your workers back to work. If you've let them go, you have 8 weeks plus overhead. This is a very important program. I'm pleased to announce we are going to raise the interest rate on these loans. And again, the interest rate is paid for as part of the program. The borrower doesn't have to pay this to 1%. We had announced it was going to be 50 basis points. We've heard from some smaller community banks that their deposit costs, even though the government's borrowing at 3 or 4 basis points, this is on average a 90-day loan. To make this attractive for community banks, we've agreed to raise the interest rate. Again, I encourage everybody, take out the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm also pleased to report the economic impact payments. I had previously said this would take us 3 weeks. I'm pleased to report that within 2 weeks, the first payments will be direct deposit into taxpayers' account. And as the President said, last night the President authorized me to say that anybody that has Social Security recipients won't need to file a new tax return, and we'll have that. If we don't have your direct deposit information, we'll be putting up a web portal so that you can put that up. It is a very large priority. The President has made clear we want to get this money quickly into your hands. I'm also pleased to report that we continue to work closely with the Federal Reserve. We're in the process of designing a new facility that we call the Main Street Lending Facility. We're also looking at facilities for state governments as well. And I'm also pleased to report the Employee Retention Credit. It's up and running. The first $10,000 of wages, you get a 50% credit. That's $5,000 per person. And for everyone who's kept someone, you can immediately get that money. You can deduct it from what you owe the IRS immediately. If you don't owe us money, you'll get a refundable tax credit. So that is up and running. I'm also pleased to report we have the program up and running. We're taking applications from the airlines, from the cargo companies, and from national security companies. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Steve. For Jovita or Steve, any questions, please?
Yes. Mr. Secretary, Chase Bank sent a letter to its business clients today saying that they don't have necessary guidance from the SBA, from the Treasury Department, to be able to accept loan applications starting tomorrow. The need is clearly enormous, but at least one major bank says they're not fully empowered yet to be able to help their customers.
Well, I spoke to all the CEOs yesterday. I had a conference call with them. We got very good input from them on what they needed. As I said, people were working till 4 o'clock. I believe we just put up the Federal Register with the new guidelines for lenders. I've been assured that the banks will be in the process starting tomorrow. Now, again, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we committed that this will be available tomorrow, and I encourage all companies, go to SBA.com, go to Treasury.gov. You can see the information you need immediately.
Mr. Secretary, just to follow up with the small business owners, a number of them saying that they were on that conference call and that there's a tremendous power struggle going on between the Treasury and SBA, and that it's over process and forms is what they tell me, and that lenders are actually opting out because they can't make enough money to even service the loans. So how are you going to make sure these small business owners get the capital they need to survive right now?
Well, first of all, I can assure you, Jovita's here. Jovita used to work for me as the treasurer. There's no power struggle. Jovita and our team, as I said, worked together till 4 o'clock in the morning, started working at 7 o'clock again. We've made the form simpler, and I can assure you at 5 points, I've told these bankers they should take all their traders and put them in the branches. So there'll never be another opportunity to earn 5 points on a 90-day fully government guaranteed loan.
And those checks right into direct deposit, IRS now saying it could take 4 to 5 months. You're saying 2 weeks.
Well, let me be clear. I don't know where let me be clear. I don't know where you're hearing these things. I told you this would be 3 weeks. I'm now committing to 2 weeks. We're delivering on our commitments. The IRS, which I oversee, within 2 weeks, the first money won't be in people's accounts.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I know the question is not about the first checks for folks who have direct deposit. Sounds like those will go out pretty quickly. The question is then for folks who don't have direct deposit, and there was a staff memo that was released by the House Ways and Means Committee today saying that that process could take up to 5 weeks. That takes you to mid-August. Is that how long it's going to take?
That is not going to take
5 months, I'm sorry.
Again, let me just say, when Obama sent out these checks, it took months and months and months. I am assuring the American public they need the money now. What we're going to do is, again, if we have your information, you'll get it within 2 weeks. If you're Social Security, you'll get it very quickly after that. If we don't have your information, you'll have a simple web portal. You'll upload it. If we don't have that, we'll send you checks in the mail.
How many checks can you process a week, though? How many checks can you...
Again, we can process a lot of checks, but we don't want to send checks.